So the gospel writers, if you think about it this way, there were these stories about Jesus that probably traveled independently before the gospels were written down. Remember, we're in Mark through the rest of ordinary time. That's why we got our green on, and then Advent we'll switch to Luke, but Mark was the first written. So the gospel writers or editors, they would take these stories and they would piece them together, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and the order they put them in sometimes was they were trying to make a point. So in Mark's gospel, which is the shortest, there's this section, kind of chapter 8, 9, and 10, where Jesus 3 times predicts his death. 3 times says, if you want to save your life, you're going to have to lose it. If you want to be first, you got to be last. And he frames that with 2 stories of healing someone that is blind. So the first one was back in chapter 8. Remember that kind of story? It's kind of a colorful one where there's the guy who's blind and Jesus spits on the ground and he takes the mud and wipes it in the guy's eyes and he says, "What do you see?" And the guy says, "I see people walking around, but they look like trees." And so then Jesus has to kind of do over. He doesn't quite, give you another shot. So then Jesus does it again and then the man can see. And then there's the predictions of the passion. And then now this ending of it is kind of the bracket is Jesus healing another man who's blind. And this time Jesus just speaks and the man is healed. But Mark frames it that way as kind of a contrast of saying these 2 people who we think can't see really can see, when the disciples who are right there with Jesus seem confused and are still, trying to banter back and be in the top position. And remember last week we had the rich man who didn't want to leave, didn't want to follow, didn't want to let go. So this kind of contrast. So it's a short pericope is the word for that, but it's a lovely story about Bartimaeus, who is one of our saints. They, kind of like Jesus and the disciples, came to Jericho. As Jesus and his disciples and a large crowd were leaving Jericho, Bartimaeus, son of Timaeus, a blind beggar, was sitting by the roadside. Sitting by the way is the Greek. When Bartimaeus heard that it was Jesus of Nazareth, he began to shout out and say, "Jesus, son of David, have mercy on me." Many sternly rebuked him, ordered him to be quiet. The Greek is actually rebuked. But he cried out even more loudly, "Son of David, have mercy on me." Jesus stood still and said, "Call him here." And they called the blind man, saying to him, "Take heart, take courage, really, get up. He is calling you." So throwing off his cloak, Bartimaeus sprang up and came to Jesus. Then Jesus said to him, "What do you want me to do for you?" All right, what can I do to support you? And the blind man said to him, "My teacher," or Rabboni, "let me see again." Jesus said to him, "Go, your faith has made you well." Immediately, Bartimaeus regained his sight and followed Jesus on the way.